Chapter 1 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Larry Wilson. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story 1. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. "Awake, awake, 'tis Easter morn," sang the weathercock on his little tin horn, and he swung about in the morning breeze and called to the swallows under the eaves. Billy Bunny in the old briar patch hopped out of bed and lifted the latch. "I'm awake, Mr. Weathercock, I'm awake." Then he hurriedly ate his buckwheat cake, and after that he was ready to hunt for Easter eggs in the elephant's trunk. But the elephant's trunk didn't have any Easter eggs in it, only some circus clothes and a bag of peanuts and some popcorn, and, oh, yes, a bottle of lemon soda. So Billy Bunny came down from the garret where Mrs. Bunny had stored the trunk until the circus came to town again, and hopped out on the pleasant meadow. It was very early, so early that Mr. Happy Sun was just peeking over the old barn where the weathercock stood. "There's where I'm going to hunt for Easter eggs," cried the little rabbit, "over at the old farm." And away he hopped, lippity-lop, clippity-hop, and by he came to the farmyard. All the barnyard folk were up and dressed, and Cocky Docky was singing a song about Easter eggs, and this is the way it went. "Cock-a-doodle-doo, some Easter eggs are blue, and some are green, and some are pink, and some are purple, too, I think." "Won't you please tell me where they are?" asked the little Billy Bunny, and then he stood up on his hind legs and wiggled his little pink nose so fast it made Cocky Docky so cross-eyed to look at him that he had to turn the other way. And it was mighty lucky that he did, too, for just at that very moment a black shadow came across the sky. "Run, run! It's Robber Hawk!" cried the little rooster, and into the henhouse went all the chickens, and Billy Bunny, too, for hawks are just as fond of little rabbits, you know, as they are of nice tender chickens. Well, pretty soon the little bunny thought about the Easter eggs again, so he peeped into the nests. But, oh dear me, he was dreadfully disappointed to find only some china eggs, which the big kind farmer had left to make the hens feel happy. And if he doesn't boil the china eggs for breakfast by mistake, I'll tell you in the next story how Billy Bunny took a trip to the sky-blue-pink country to get his Easter eggs. End of Chapter 1.
Chapter 2 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Katherine Seeholster. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story 2. Billy Bunny and the Easter Eggs. Well, as I meant to tell you in last night's story, only I didn't have any more room, when Billy Bunny hopped out of the henhouse, he saw that the little rooster had made a mistake. It wasn't Robber Hawk at all who had made them all hide, for there sat the big, kind American eagle, talking to the weathercock. And as soon as he saw the little rabbit, he said, "Hello, Billy Bunny. I'll take you up to the place where you can find lots of Easter eggs." "Can you?" cried the little rabbit, hopping up and down. He was so happy. Then the big, kind American eagle took Billy Bunny on his back and flew away with him until they came to the sky-blue-pink country, where there were all sorts of hens. There was a green hen, and a yellow hen, and a pink hen, but the rooster was sky-blue. They all sang a different song. The yellow hen said, "Hoop-de-doo-doo-doo," and the green hen said, "Chicka-chickadee," but the pink hen only said, "La-la-la," for she was very lazy. Now, the green hen laid red eggs, and the yellow hen blue ones, but the pink hen never laid any, for she was such a lazy thing. And that was the reason why the big, kind American eagle had brought little Billy Bunny to the sky-blue-pink country. You see, he thought if a little bunny on Easter Day asked the pink hen to lay an egg, she couldn't refuse. And this would make the sky-blue rooster very happy, and he would give Billy Bunny some Easter eggs, which would make the little rabbit very happy too. So Billy Bunny said to the pink hen, "Little pink hen, won't you lay a pretty egg for Easter Day? I've hunted everywhere, I think, to find a little egg that's pink." Then the sky-blue rooster said to her, "Little pink hen, I humbly beg that you will lay a pinky egg." And would you believe it? She went straight to her nest and laid 13 beautiful pink eggs. The sky-blue rooster was so tickled that he sang the Star-Spangled Banner all through 3 times, standing on the tip of his longest tail feather. And after that, he gave the little rabbit a basket full of pretty colored eggs. Then the American eagle took little Billy Bunny on his back and started off for the old briar patch, and the little pink hen was awfully sorry to have him go, for it was the first time she had ever seen a little rabbit. Well, it didn't take very long to get home, and wasn't Mrs. Bunny proud when she saw Billy Bunny on the eagle's back? You see, he had little American flags fastened to the tips of his wings, and a big necktie of red, white, and blue around his neck. And if I keep my typewriter from singing the Star-Spangled Banner until tomorrow night, I'll tell you another story about Billy Bunny. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Katherine Seehelster. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story 3. Billy Bunny and Daddy Longlegs. One morning, when little Billy Bunny looked at his gold watch and chain, he said to himself, "I'm going to make a visit on Uncle Lucky's left hind foot." You see, the old gentleman rabbit had given him the gold watch, which always reminded the little bunny of his good, kind uncle. So Billy Bunny got out his striped candy cane and his knapsack and started off. And after he had gone a little ways, not so very far, he came across old Daddy Longlegs on his pushmobile. "Oh, Daddy Longlegs!" cried the little rabbit. "Won't you let me get on too?" "All right, climb up behind," answered the long-legged old gentleman insect, and away they went. My goodness gracious me, and my goodness gracious you! They went so fast that the rubber tires got all out of breath, and then, of course, the wheels bumped so that Daddy Longlegs and the little bunny fell off. "I've got a bicycle pump in my knapsack," said Billy Bunny, but Daddy Longlegs said, "You can have the pushmobile if you want it. My legs are all tired of pushing. I guess I'll go into the meadow and see if the cows are coming home." Well, after a while, the little rabbit fixed the tires and he started off. And by he came to a steep hill. And as he didn't have any brake on this pushmobile, when he reached the bottom of the hill, he was going so fast that the hind wheel ran right over the front wheel and he was thrown into the river. And he would have been drowned if the old billy goat hadn't come along just then with his ferry boat. Now, wasn't that lucky? But wait till I tell you who was on board. You'd never guess, so I'll tell you right away. Why, it was good, kind Uncle Lucky, and he had his automobile with him, too. And as soon as the ferry boat reached the shore, Uncle Lucky let the little rabbit steer the Lucky-mobile. I mean the automobile. Well, by and by, after they had gone maybe 1,000 miles or less, they stopped at a little house, and the old gentleman rabbit got out and went inside. But he didn't tell Billy Bunny what he was going in for. Wasn't that queer? It made the little rabbit dreadfully curious, so pretty soon, in a few half-minutes, he hopped out of the automobile and peeked in the front window, for the little house had only one window, and that was so small you had to close one eye to look in. There sat Uncle Lucky talking to a black ant. But what was he saying? I will have to tell you in the next story, for I haven't any more room tonight. End of chapter 3.
Chapter 4 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by ShrimpPhish. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story number 4. Billy Bunny and Dr. Quack. As soon as Billy Bunny looked in the window of the ant's house, as I told you in the last story, Uncle Lucky came to the door and whispered, "She is very ill. You had better go for Dr. Quack at once." So the little rabbit jumped into the automobile, and pretty soon he came to the place where the duck doctor lived. It didn't take old Dr. Quack long to get his little black bag and jump into the automobile, but oh dear me, just as they turned a corner they ran into a rag man. My, how the bells rang on the old rag car, and how the old pots and pans rattled. They made such a terrible noise that the old horse ran away. He must have been an old race horse, I guess, for he just whisked his tail and threw out his hind hoofs, and then he was out of sight. "That's lucky for you," said Dr. Quack. "He'll never come back any more." And he didn't, which shows that Dr. Quack knew a lot about measles. In a little while after this they reached the ant's house, and Dr. Quack shook his head when he saw poor Mrs. Ant, for she looked very ill, and the wise duck doctor didn't know whether to give her bread pills or sugar water. And if Billy Bunny hadn't found a bottle of ginger ale in his knapsack and given her a drink, I'm sure she would have died. Pretty soon she was perfectly well, and Dr. Quack said as long as Billy Bunny had cured her, he wouldn't charge her more than 5 cents. Which Uncle Lucky paid, because he felt sorry for her, which was just like the kind old gentleman rabbit. You see, he was always doing something for somebody. "Now, where shall we go?" asked Billy Bunny, when he and Uncle Lucky were once more in their automobile. "Down to the village. I want to get some goggles. I'll buy you a pair, too," said good, kind Uncle Lucky. But when the little rabbit put his on, Uncle Lucky began to laugh, and then he couldn't stop. He just kept on laughing for miles and miles. And although Billy Bunny tried to frighten him by making the automobile jump over a fence and run up a telegraph pole, it didn't stop the old gentleman rabbit. No, sir. He kept on laughing harder and harder, till all at once he laughed himself right out of the automobile. And then, when Billy Bunny tried to stop the automobile, it wouldn't stop laughing either. Oh, dear me, I mean it wouldn't stop going. "What is the matter?" cried the little rabbit, almost frightened to death. And just then he came to a railroad crossing, where a train was coming by. But wasn't it wonderful? That automobile stopped just in time. But the little rabbit didn't. He just kept on going, and the first thing he knew he landed right on top of that train of cars. Well, he's safe for tonight anyway, and if the train gets in on time tomorrow, I'll tell you what happened to little Bunny in the dining car. End of chapter 4. Chapter 5 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by ShrimpPhish. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story number 5. Billy Bunny in the Dining Car. "This way to the dining car," said the colored porter as Billy Bunny slid down to the platform. Of course, you remember in the last story he had been thrown out of his automobile right on top of a train of cars. It's wonderful how lucky some people are, and the little rabbit was mighty hungry, so he followed the porter into the dining car. He had Roman punch in the middle of his meal, and ice cream at the end, and he was so happy that he forgot all about poor Uncle Lucky. Everything was going along nicely when all of a sudden the train came to a standstill, and 6 big robbers entered the dining car. "Hold up your hands!" they yelled. Then they emptied everybody's pockets, and if Billy Bunny hadn't hidden his knapsack under the table, they would have taken that, I guess. Of course, they took his gold watch and chain, which good, kind Uncle Lucky had given him, and this made Billy Bunny feel dreadfully, and it made him wonder, too, where the dear old gentleman rabbit was, and whether he was hurt from his fall out of the automobile. Then the robbers shot off their pistols just to make every one feel how lucky it was they had only lost their money and watches, and not their lives. And then the train robbers jumped off and ran away. Billy Bunny felt very sad at losing his gold watch and chain, and he jumped off the train to see where the robbers went. After a while they went into a little hut in the woods. "If I only had someone to help me!" cried the little rabbit, and just then along came the circus elephant. When he heard what had happened, he said, "Climb on my back, and we'll go and get your gold watch and chain." "How?" asked the little bunny, but the elephant didn't answer. He just tiptoed along until he reached the log hut. Then he peeked in through a crack, and so did the little rabbit, after he had climbed down from the elephant's back, of course. "I see my gold watch and chain." "Where?" asked the elephant very softly. "Hanging around the parrot's neck," whispered Billy Bunny. Then the elephant poked his great long trunk through the window, and what do you suppose the parrot did? Why, she said, "Polly doesn't want a watch," and then she walked along on the elephant's trunk, right through the window, and handed the watch to the little rabbit. Wasn't that nice of her? Then the robbers ran out of the hut, but when they saw the big elephant, they turned around and ran the other way. "Ha ha!" laughed the good-natured beast. "Here's a nice home for you and me." And he went inside the log hut and sat down on a chair. But what the little rabbit did I will tell you in the next story, for he was so busy winding his gold watch and chain that he wouldn't do anything else in this story. End of Chapter 5. Chapter 6 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by ShrimpPhish. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story number 6. Billy Bunny and the Owl. Did you ever see a bunny and a parrot take a ride upon a big black elephant who skip-toed in his stride? I don't suppose you ever did, so I'll tell you. You remember in the last story how the parrot gave Billy Bunny his gold watch and chain, which the robbers had stolen from him. Well, the little rabbit was so pleased that he invited Polly Parrot to come along with him and his elephant friend. And so she did. And as she didn't want to leave behind her lovely gilded cage, she tied it on to the elephant's tail, and he didn't mind it a bit. Well, these 3 good friends went on, and by they came to an old dead tree, which there lived a very wise owl. It was late in the afternoon, and the wise old bird was just putting on his stovepipe hat to go out and hunt for mice. But when he saw Billy Bunny and his 2 friends, he lifted his hat and said very politely, "What can I do for you 3?" "We are looking for adventure," said little Billy Bunny, waving his striped candy cane over the elephant's head, while the parrot smiled a lovely smile at the old owl, and the elephant winked his ears and wiggled his tail till the cage almost fell off. "If you are in search of adventure," said the old owl, with a blinky blink, for the light still bothered his eyes, although it was fast getting dark. "If you are in search of adventure, let me tell you what to do." "Go ahead, Mr. Owl," said the elephant, sitting down and forgetting all about the cage until it stuck into his back, when he got up with a jump and said, "Oh, take that cage right off my tail. It makes me feel so blue. I've never worn a cage before, so this will never do." But the pretty parrot began to cry and feel so badly that the elephant said, "Oh, never mind, I'll do most anything for a lady," which pleased the parrot so that she sang a lovely little song, and this is the way it went. "The owl and the bunny and the great big elephant went along with a parrot to call upon his aunt." "Well, well, well!" cried the elephant all of a sudden. "That reminds me! My aunt lives not very far from here." So he bowed to the old owl and started off with Billy Bunny and the parrot on his back. And by they came to his big relative's house, and after knocking on the door it was opened, and there stood a lovely white lady elephant. But what she said I can't tell you tonight, for she asked me to wait until tomorrow. End of Chapter 6.
Chapter 7 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Billy Bunny and the Circus Elephant. In last night's story, you remember I said I would tell you what the white lady elephant did when she saw Billy Bunny and the parrot on the circus elephant. Well, the first thing she did was to exclaim, "My little nephew has come back from the circus." And would you believe it, the big, kind circus elephant began to cry. You see, when he was a boy, he had run away and joined a circus, and this was the first time since then that he had seen his good elephant aunt. "Come right in, Billy, and bring your friends in too. Dearie me, I remember so well how you used to look in your little blue gingham trousers." And then she began to cry, which made the circus elephant, of course, cry all the more. And presently their tears made a little pond right on the parlor floor. And when the neat white lady elephant saw this, she dried her eyes with her pocket handkerchief and the floor with a big, clean rag. And then she made some tea and toast, and brought out a jar of jam, and everybody had a fine feast. And the parrot was so polite, she never once said, "Polly wants a cracker," which was mighty lucky, for the white lady elephant didn't have a cracker in the house, for it wasn't the 4th of July, and so why should she? And after that they all sat round and talked, and the white lady elephant told a story about the circus elephant when he was a little boy and wore knickerbockers and didn't have a bird cage tied to his tail, which his aunt said was very risky for the cage. And when it grew dark, they turned on the electric lights and played the graphophone. The little rabbit was so happy he couldn't keep still, but hopped around with the circus elephant, dancing the tango and the turkey trot. And the white lady elephant laughed till she had a pain in her in her side. By and by, when the old grandmother goose clock struck 12, they all went to bed. But first the elephant untied the parrot's cage from his tail, for he was afraid he'd have bad dreams if he didn't. But, oh dear me, isn't it too bad? Something happened before daybreak. I was hoping we could get through the night without an accident, but it seems we can't. All of a sudden, just like that, they heard hoarse voices singing outside. "We are robbers, fierce and bold, and we are come to steal your gold. You'd better then unlock your door, or we will steal a whole lot more." But whether the white lady elephant unlocked the door or not, I shan't tell you till next time. But this I will tell you, she couldn't find the key. End of chapter 7. Chapter 8 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Billy Bunny and the Robbers. Well, the white elephant lady didn't unlock the front door, for she had lost the key, as I told you in the last story. Instead, she put her head out of the window and said to the robbers, "Don't you dare come around here again and sing that song. You woke me up out of a sound sleep." "I'm very sorry we did that," said the head robber, and he winked at the others. But the white elephant lady didn't see him. "We tried to get in the front door, but we found it locked, so we had to wake you." Then the robbers began another song. "We are robbers most polite, and hate to wake you up at night. But if we do, we simply say, we'll call again another day." Which they did, before the white elephant lady could even ask them in for breakfast. Then, after a while, the circus elephant said he must be on his way back to the circus. So Billy Bunny and the parrot climbed on his back, and they all started off after saying goodbye to the kind white elephant lady. And, oh dear me, didn't she cry when her elephant nephew kissed her? Not because he kissed her, you know, but because he said goodbye. Well, they hadn't gone very far when they met the circus wagons, and of course the elephant had to say goodbye. And then the parrot found a lovely shady tree where crackers grew on bushes all around. So she hung up her cage on a limb and wouldn't travel any farther, and the little rabbit had to go on alone. But he didn't care, for he was a brave little bunny and wanted to see new things all the time. By and by it grew dark, and the little rabbit looked around for a place to sleep. But there weren't any hollow stumps or haystack or feather beds in sight. So he sat down and scratched his right ear with his left hind foot and wrinkled his forehead and tried to think what was the best thing to do. And while he was thinking, he heard a little voice singing, "Rock-a-bye birdie, up in your nest, mother is folding you under her breast." "I wish I were a little birdie," said Billy Bunny out loud, not thinking what he was doing. "Put your knapsack under that bush and crawl inside of it," said the mother bird. "You'll have a nice nest, and it will be out of sight." Now, wasn't that good advice? So the little rabbit did this, and fastened the straps so nobody could get in, and pretty soon he was fast asleep. But I'm not going to tell you what he dreamed. for I haven't got room in tonight's story, so you must wait until tomorrow. End of Chapter 8.
Chapter 9 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read to you by Katherine Seeholster. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story 9. Billy Bunny's Dream. Let me see. I left off last night just as Billy Bunny crawled into his knapsack under the friendly bush for a good night's sleep. Yes, I remember now. He had just fastened the straps so that nobody could get in, and he turned over to go to sleep. Well, how he snored! He snored so hard and so loud that by and by he woke up a wild pig who lived all alone in the woods, and ate acorns and roots for breakfast, and sometimes for supper. At first, the wild pig thought it was another pig grunting, for some people snore just like a pig grunts, you know, and I guess Billy Bunny was one of those snoring kind. Well, anyway, the wild pig got out of bed and put on her bedroom slippers and tiptoed over to the friendly bush. But she couldn't see anything but the knapsack. But pretty soon, as she turned her head from side to side and cocked up her ears to catch the snoring sounds, she found they came out of the knapsack. And then, wasn't she curious? Oh, dear, and oh, don't! Wasn't she, though? She poked her nose under it and over it, and then she turned it over, and this, of course, woke up the little rabbit, and he unfastened the straps and peeked out. And when he saw that wild pig close to him, he gave a dreadful yell, which woke up the mamma bird and all the little birdies, and a factory whistle, which began to blow like everything, which was too bad, for it got all the working people up an hour too soon. "I won't hurt you," grunted the wild pig. "I promise. I won't hurt you if you'll promise to stop snoring." "All right," said the little bunny boy. "I'll promise. And I guess I'll get up, for that will help me keep my promise." And he hopped out and combed his fur with a little pine cone he found on the ground. "My, but you're a neat little rabbit," grunted the wild pig, who didn't seem so wild after all. For if she had been so very wild, how would she have known anything about neatness? I'd like to know, and so would you. "I hope you'll excuse my snoring," said Billy Bunny, "but I was very tired, and I had to go to sleep on my back all night, and that makes one snore, so they tell me." Then he took out a clean pocket handkerchief from the knapsack and a piece of apple pie and offered some to the wild pig, but she only took the pie. Wasn't that nice of her? And of course, as the little rabbit hadn't eaten very much, he looked at his knapsack again. And wasn't he lucky? He found a piece of custard pie, and the pig would have eaten this too, only he didn't give her a chance. Now I'm sure you would like to know what happened next when the pig tried to wipe her nose with the little rabbit's handkerchief, but you'll have to wait until tomorrow. End of Chapter 9. Chapter 10 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story 10. Billy Bunny and the Wild Pig. Well, something did happen to the wild pig when she wiped her nose with the little rabbit's handkerchief. You see, there was some lovely perfume on it, which made the pig sneeze so hard that she had to run down to the brook and poke her nose into the mud. Then Billy Bunny threw his knapsack over his back and started off on his travels. And pretty soon he began to whistle because if you whistle on your way, makes your work seem just like play. Seems just if you had someone laughing with you full of fun. Whistle has a jolly tone, makes you never feel alone. And this is just the way the little rabbit felt as he swung his candy cane back and forth and hopped merrily along. And then, all of a sudden, quicker than bedtime, out jumped a fierce wild cat. "Meow, meow," she said, licking her whiskers with her red tongue and squinting up one of her yellow eyes. Oh my, but she looked wicked and fierce. "Oh, please, Mrs. Wildcat," cried the frightened little bunny, "don't scratch me. Scare me if you want to, but don't scratch me." Then the wildcat began to purr, and she pulled her great big claws into her muff, and she opened her yellow eye, the one she had squinted up, and after that she rolled over on her back and tickled her nose with her tail. And this made Billy Bunny laugh, and he forgot all about being scared, and the wildcat forgot all about scratching. And pretty soon Billy Bunny opened his knapsack and took out a little chocolate mouse and gave it to her. And wasn't she pleased? She played with that chocolate candy mouse all that afternoon and licked it until all the chocolate came off. But she didn't care because it was all peppermint cream underneath. After that, the little rabbit went on his way, and pretty soon evening came around again, and it was getting time for bed. But there wasn't any kind of mamma around to say, "Now go to bed, Billy." No siree and no siree, ma'am. He had to stay to himself, and then he couldn't find the bed. Well, after he looked and looked, he found a pile of leaves and went to sleep. And when he woke up in the morning, the school bell was ringing. And this is what it seemed to say: "Merrily we go to school, go to school, go to school. Merrily we go to school 5 days in the week. And we learn our lessons well, learn to read, learn to spell, and we mind the old school bell 5 days in the week." But I'm not going to tell you who the teacher was until next time. End of chapter 10.
Chapter 11 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Doreen, Marcotte. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story number 11. Billy Bunny and the Grasshopper Teacher. Now, let me see. Who was the teacher in the little schoolhouse whose bell rang out that pretty song I mentioned in last night's story? It was a little old maid grasshopper, but oh my, she was awfully nice. She was so patient with other people's children because she didn't have any of her own, I guess. And it was she who taught the school bell to sing every morning. "Merrily we go to school, try to never break a rule. Keep our copybooks so neat, never shuffle with our feet. Never whisper, never fool, while we're in our little school." "Good morning, Miss Grasshopper," cried the little bunny, shaking the dewdrops off his ears as he jumped up from his bed of leaves. "Good morning, my dear," said the little grasshopper school teacher. "How is your ABC this morning?" But the little bunny didn't know what she meant, and I don't either. I don't see why she didn't ask him how his XYZ was. Do you? "I like the way your bell rings," said Billy Bunny, instead of trying to answer her question. "Yes, it's a very nice bell," she said. "It makes all the difference in the world what kind of a bell you have. If it's a happy bell, the scholars are happy." Then she hurried away, for it was nearly school time. Well, pretty soon, as the little rabbit sat thinking over what the little grasshopper school teacher had said, a big load of hay came by, and the little rabbit made a wish. And after that, he jumped up and hopped along a shady path until he came to a fountain where there was a school of pretty goldfish. Not a study school, you know, but just a family of goldfish. There were little coral castles for them to swim in and out of, and mossy caves for them to rest in. And they looked very happy, for goldfish are very rich. So the little rabbit squatted down on the edge of the fountain to watch them run races in the water, and he was having lots of fun when all of a sudden something pushed him right into the water. Wasn't that a mean thing to do? Of course, he got his eyes and nose and ears full of water, and his fur coat all wet, and the apple pie in his knapsack was all spoilt before he could hop out. But when he looked around, he couldn't see anybody or anything. Then an old goldfish told him that old Mother Magpie had done it, and then had flown away laughing to herself. "Mother always called her Old Mother Mischief," said the little bunny rabbit, giving the goldfishes some crumbs before he set out again on his journey of adventure. And if the little crabfish doesn't eat a great big whale, I'll tell you by tomorrow another bunny tale. End of story number 11, Billy Bunny and the Grasshopper Teacher. Chapter 12 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Doreen Marcotte. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story number 12. Billy Bunny and the Dreadful Dragon. Why is the wind so merry? Because it loves to blow across the grassy meadows or over fields of snow, or when the clouds are raining, or when the sun is out. No matter what's the matter, he'll never, never pout. "Gracious me!" exclaimed Billy Bunny. "It's going to rain!" So he opened his knapsack and took out his little pink umbrella and his rubber boots. Well, pretty soon, before the clock struck, it began to rain, and oh my, what big drops! They pitter-pattered on the little pink parasol until you would have thought they would break through, and that's just what the little rabbit thought. So he looked about for a place to get in out of the wet, and just then he saw a cave, so he hopped in. But, oh dear, one never knows what's in a cave besides bats and owls, and perhaps the little rabbit didn't know that. But anyway, no sooner was he inside than a rough, gruff voice said, "Don't you know that it's bad luck to bring an open umbrella into a house?" "But this is a parasol," explained the frightened little rabbit. "Doesn't make any difference," said the gruff, rough voice. "A parasol is a sun umbrella." "Oh dear, cried the little bunny. "Why didn't I stay out in the rain?" And then the rough, gruff voice said, "I'm glad you didn't, for I'm going to eat you." Now, wasn't that a terrible thing to hear in a dark and dismal cave? "Who are you?" cried the poor little frightened bunny. "I'm a dreadful dragon." And then there was a horrid shuffling noise in the cave, and pretty soon 2 bright lights, like lamps on an automobile at night, shone in the little rabbit's face. "Oh, please, Mr. Dreadful Dragon, don't hurt me," cried Billy Bunny, his left hind leg knocking against his right hind leg and his teeth playing chatterbox in his mouth. And then what do you think he did? Why, he put the open parasol down on the floor of the cave and turned around and hopped out as fast as he could. And the dreadful dragon never saw him go, for the little pink parasol was in the way, you see. Wasn't that bright in Billy Bunny? And if the pretty parasol doesn't tickle my rag doll, I will tell you, if you're good, how Billy Bunny chopped the wood. But not in this story, for there is no more room. End of Story 12, Billy Bunny and the Dreadful Dragon.
Chapter 13 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Billy Bunny and Beaver, the Woodchopper. Well, it was lucky that Billy Bunny escaped from the dreadful dragon, although it was too bad he had to leave his pretty pink parasol in the dismal cave. But I'm so glad he got away. I want to say hip hip hooray, just like that. Only I mustn't forget that I promised to tell you how the little rabbit chopped the wood. Well, this is how it happened. All of a sudden, as he was hopping along with his knapsack bumping up and down on his back and his striped candy cane swinging back and forth, he came to a brook. And right there on the bank was a beaver chopping down a tree. He wasn't exactly chopping it down, you know, for beavers don't use an axe, but gnaw into the trunk with their sharp teeth until the tree falls. Well, sir, as soon as the beaver saw Master Billy Bunny hopping along as frisky as you please, he called out, "Look here, Mr. Rabbit, won't you help me cut down this tree?" And what do you think Billy Bunny said? Well, he didn't say anything, but he took out of his knapsack a sharp axe. And in a few minutes he cut that tree down just like a regular woodchopper, and the beaver was so pleased he asked the little rabbit to dinner. Wasn't that kind of him? Then they both sat down and ate watercress salad, and after that Billy Bunny said goodbye and hopped along on his way. And by he came to another beaver who was digging a canal right up to a big log so that it would float into the stream. "Please, Mr. Rabbit, won't you help me dig?" asked the beaver, wiping the perspiration from his forehead with a big polka-dot blue handkerchief. But Billy Bunny never said a word. He opened his knapsack and took out a little shovel, and in a few minutes he had dug that canal right up to the log. Then the beaver floated it down to the stream and put it in the dam he was making. And then he thanked the little rabbit and gave him a big piece of chocolate layer cake, which Mrs. Beaver had just made for supper. After that, all the beavers who lived in this place stood in a ring and sang the beaver song. And if I remember right, it runs like this. Busy as a beaver, busy all the day, but we're very happy just the same. For we think our work is just as nice as play, and we make believe it is a game. Just then, all of a sudden, 1, 2, 3, bang! Out jumped a wicked red fox. and into the water splashed the beavers, leaving the little rabbit to finish the beaver song, if there is any more to it. But I'm so excited over what may happen to Billy Bunny that I can't remember another word. End of chapter 13. Chapter 14 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Billy Bunny and the Wicked Red Fox. "Now I've got you," said the Wicked Red Fox, who, you remember in the last story, jumped out at Billy Bunny and the Beavers as they sat on the bank of the brook singing the beaver song. "Oh dear, oh dear," cried the little rabbit, and he opened his knapsack to look for a handkerchief to wipe his eyes with. But what do you think he did? He took out his little axe instead of the nice clean handkerchief, and threw it with all his might right at the head of the cruel fox. Not the handkerchief, you know, but the axe. And if that fox hadn't jumped to one side and run away, his head would have been chopped off just as sure as you're reading this story. Now, wasn't that bright in the little bunny? Well, I think so, and so did all the beavers, for they came out of the water and pulled out the axe, which was stuck in a tree near by, and the kind Lady Beaver, who had made the chocolate cake, gave him another piece, and patted him on the head and said he was a brave bunny boy, and that his mother ought to be proud of him. "I mustn't wait any longer," said the little rabbit after finishing the cake. So he said good-bye and hopped away, and pretty soon he heard a voice singing. "Who are you?" asked the little rabbit, sitting down and letting his knapsack slip to the ground, for it was pretty heavy and he was tired. "Who are you, please?" he said again, but the voice kept right on singing. Then the little rabbit looked all about him, under the fence and behind a log and around a tree and in the bushes, but the only thing he could see was a big sunflower. It couldn't be that, he thought, but it was just the same, for in a minute the big sunflower leaned over and whispered into the little rabbit's ear, for he was standing up close, you see, looking up into the big yellow-faced flower. "I am singing my glory song, little bunny. Listen, please, for I must finish. Beautiful, beautiful sky-blown sun, high up over the wood, I'm trying to glow the best I know, as every sunflower should. I shine in the light of your golden smile as you sail o'er the sky-blue sea. I turn each day my face your way. You're the light of my life to me." "That's a very pretty song," said Billy Bunny. "Do you like it?" replied the sunflower gladly. "Well, maybe the next time you come this way I shall have some nice seeds to give you, for in the autumn my petals turn to seeds, and little bunnies are very fond of them. End of chapter 14.
Chapter 15 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Hannah Lake. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story number 15. Billy Bunny and the Black Beetle. Pitter-patter on the pane. Hear the gentle April rain. What a lovely crystal shower, falling on each growing flower. When the rain clouds all are done, then will come the merry sun. And where do you suppose Billy Bunny was? I forgot to tell you in the last story that after he left the big, kind sunflower, he crawled into a glass house where all kinds of lovely flowers were growing. And it was so nice and warm that he fell fast asleep and never woke up until the next morning when he heard the rain falling on the big window panes. "Goodness me, where am I?" he cried, stretching his pink ears and wiggling his little pink nose. "You are in a hothouse," replied a voice. "You are in a glass house, where the flowers grow when the wind is cold and the rain is snow." "And who are you?" asked the little rabbit, looking all about him and then squinting through the hole in a flower pot to see who might be inside. "I am a beetle," said the voice. And then Billy Bunny saw a big black insect on the stem of a rose. "But you had better not stay here, for if the gardener should see you, he'd put you in a cage, maybe, or a box with slats in front like a prison. No, you'd better not wait here." So Billy Bunny hopped out of the big glass house. And just in time, too, for at that moment the gardener himself opened the door and walked in. My, but it was raining! But it didn't take Billy Bunny long to open his knapsack and take out his umbrella. And then he put on his rubber boots, and after that he didn't care if it rained pitchforks. No siree and no siree, man. I wouldn't either, for I know it couldn't. Well, after a while, the ground was all covered with water, just like a lake, and it was almost up to the tops of his rubber boots. And pretty soon, they were so full of water that he couldn't hop. Wasn't that just too dreadful for anything? Oh dear, what shall I do?" cried the little rabbit. "Don't give up, I'll save you," cried a voice. And over the water came a queer-looking boat. It was crowded with all sorts of animals and insects. "Get aboard," said a little meadow mouse. Then a long-legged cricket helped Billy Bunny climb up on the deck. And somebody else, I think it was a mole, pulled his boots off and emptied the water out of them. "Go inside, out of the wet," said the cricket. For there was a little house on the boat, and when the rain stops and the sun comes out, we'll land somewhere. End of chapter 15.
Chapter 16 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by ShrimpPhish. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story number 16. Billy Bunny and the Bear. The little boat was safe afloat, for it was raining still, when with a shock it hit a rock and soon began to fill. Everybody scrambled onto the rock just in time, for there was a big hole in the boat, and the water soon filled it to the top. There was only just enough room on the rock for all the animals and insects if they stood perfectly still. By and by the grasshopper slipped off, and if he hadn't had long legs, he would have been drowned. After that everybody grew very quiet, and some of the smaller insects crawled upon the backs of the animals to keep from being stepped on. Pretty soon the black spider said she'd spin a long rope if somebody would tie a stone to one end and throw it over the nearest tree. After she had spun a nice long rope, Billy Bunny tied a stone on one end and threw it over to the land, and it caught on a tree. Then the spider ran back and forth on her rope, spinning and spinning away, until by and by she made a strong bridge right over the water to the dry land. And then everybody walked over very carefully without an accident. Wasn't that wonderful? I think so, and so does everyone who doesn't know anything about bridges. By this time the sun was out, so Billy Bunny said good-bye and hopped away after folding up his rubber boots and taking off his umbrella and packing them away in his knapsack. "Hey-ho!" said the little rabbit, half aloud. "Hey-ho!" "What are you saying that for?" And a big black bear crawled out of a hollow stump where he had slept all through the winter, and stood up on his hind legs and scowled at the little rabbit in a dreadful way. "I won't say it again," said Billy Bunny, looking this way and that way to see if he couldn't get away. "Grrr," growled the bear. "I'll grab you quicker than pistols if you try to hop away." "Oh, I won't!" cried Billy Bunny, and he was so frightened he wiggled his little pink nose so fast that the bear couldn't keep count, and the more he tried, the faster the little bunny made his nose go, until the bear got so tired when he counted up to 9,570,640,000,000 and some thousands and hundreds and tens, and a carrot that he rolled over on his back, and said, Stop it! I've missed one or two, and I don't want to start all over again." And while he was rolling around, Billy Bunny hopped away as fast as he could, and faster, so that the bear never caught him, not even in the next story. And I won't let him either, if you are good until tomorrow night, when I'll tell you some more about the little rabbit. End of chapter 16. Chapter 17 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by ShrimpPhish. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story number 17. Billy Bunny and Squirrel Nutcracker. Did you ever in the spring hear a pussy willow sing? Listen, can't you hear her purr through the little ball of fur? See her swinging up and down on her slender stalk of brown. Little pussy, when you sing, then we know it's time for spring. "That's a very pretty song," said little Billy Bunny to Miss Pussy Willow, as he stopped by the babbling brook in the pleasant meadow on a beautiful sunshiny morning. The bluebells were ringing, and so was the little bell on Mrs. Cow's collar as she ate the new green grass close to the water's edge. Ting-a-ling, ding-a-ling, oh yes, spring music was everywhere. Robin Redbreast was caroling, and so was Bluebird, and the little brown thrush was singing sweet and low in the friendly forest. Ring-a-ling, ting-a-ling, tra-la-la, too-ra-loo! And then the deep bass voice of old Grandfather Bullfrog from the mill pond came across the meadow. Dunk-a-dunk, dunk-a-dunk. Old Squirrel Nutcracker was sitting outside his home in the big chestnut tree, for Mrs. Nutcracker was cleaning house. Timmy Chipmunk was running along the old snake fence, and Denny Dormouse was sunning himself after his long winter sleep. Benny Beaver sat contentedly on the roof of his house, looking about, happy that the ice was gone from the forest pond, and the tender twigs were full of sap, and happy days of sunshine were come again. And Mr. Happy Sun! Well, all you had to do was to look up at his beaming face in the clear blue sky to see that he was just as jolly and yellow as he was last summer, and perhaps a little more so. "Billy Bunny! Billy Bunny!" And Mrs. Bunny hopped to the edge of the old briar patch and looked across the waving grass. "What is it, Mother?" And the little rabbit hurried home. "Your Uncle Lucky has just telephoned me that he expects to go out today, and if he feels well enough he will drop in for some carrot tea and a lettuce cake." You remember, I'm sure, how the good, kind old gentleman rabbit had laughed himself out of the automobile one day? Well, he'd been in the house ever since with a sprained ankle and was just getting around. And just then Uncle Lucky came riding over the pleasant meadow in his automobile. "I couldn't stay indoors another day," he said, limping out of the machine, for his ankle was still very lame. "So I thought I'd run over and see you all." Now wasn't that nice of him? I missed Uncle Lucky dreadfully, and now that he's out again we'll hear more about him in the next story, unless he eats too much lettuce salad so that he sprains his digestion and has to use a cane. End of Chapter 17.
Chapter 18 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Dave Capper. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story number 18. Billy Bunny and the Blue Darning Needle. Well, Uncle Lucky didn't sprain his digestion by eating too much lettuce salad, as I feared he might in the last story, but he burned his mouth with the carrot tea, which is almost as bad. However, as he was an old soldier, and had been in 3 wars, he didn't mind a little thing like that. No, indeed. "What time is it by that gold watch and chain I gave you?" he said, turning to the little rabbit. "It's 3 hours to 14 o'clock, answered his bunny nephew, who was very proud to think that his watch was still going, and it certainly did go if it could get as near 14 o'clock as that. "Well, I must be on my way," said the old gentleman rabbit as he climbed into the automobile with his sprained ankle and his burnt mouth and a big smile. For Uncle Lucky just couldn't sprain or burn that, you know. "Just keep on a-smiling, though troubles high are piling. Don't you fret, never get sad or discontented. Wear a smile, it's the style. Scowls are smiles demented." Now, if you don't know what demented means, just ask the man who sold your father the dictionary, and he'll tell you. But in case you can't find him, I'll tell you. It means crazy, and so you see a crazy smile would be a scowl. "Can't I go with Uncle Lucky as far as the mill pond?" asked the little rabbit. And of course his mother said yes, for he had run all the errands and polished the front doorknob without a grumble, like a good bunny boy. But oh dear me, isn't it terrible always to have something disagreeable happen to these 2 nice rabbits? They had only gone a little ways, just so far, when the rubber tire on the left hind wheel burst, and blew the bandage right off of dear, kind Uncle Lucky's sprained ankle. "What shall I do?" he cried as the bandage flew up in the air. That was such a nice bandage, and it had a red cross on it too, and it made me feel just like a wounded soldier again. "Don't worry," cried a blue darning needle. "I'll get it for you." And would you believe it? She did. And in a few minutes she sewed it on so nicely that if all 4 rubber tires had burst at the same time, I don't believe it would have come off again. But I'm glad they didn't, just the same, for they might have blown Billy Bunny's gold watch out of his pocket, and that would have been a dreadful misfortune. But when they went to blow the automobile horn, it wouldn't make a sound. It had burst too. Oh dear me, and oh dear you. So they asked Uncle Bullfrog to get in, and he went honk honk, just like that, so they didn't miss the horn at all. And if they don't squeeze Uncle Bullfrog too hard so that he says something else, I won't tell you what. You shall hear in the next story how the automobile ran away with Uncle Lucky and little Billy Bunny, to say nothing of Uncle Bullfrog. End of Story 18.
Chapter 19 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story number 19. Billy Bunny and Uncle Bullfrog. Of course you remember, in the last story, that the automobile ran away with Billy Bunny and good Uncle Lucky after they had taken in old Uncle Bullfrog because their horn was broken, and they wanted him to honk honk. Well, old Uncle Bullfrog never honked so much in all his life. But the more he honked, the faster went the automobile, until finally it ran right into the circus tent, where the little rabbit's elephant friend played on the piccolo. And of course he stopped playing pinoche at once. He was sitting at a little table with 3 friends, a kangaroo, a black poodle dog, and a hippopotamus, for it was in the morning, you know, and the show didn't commence until the afternoon. Well, after the automobile had run over the table and scattered all the cards and made the kangaroo jump and the poodle dog growl and the hippopotamus bark and the elephant blow his piccolo, it stopped right in front of the lion's cage. Wasn't it lucky it didn't bump into the lion, for the lion wasn't a friend of Billy Bunny's, you see. Then Uncle Lucky Left Hindfoot hopped over to the elephant and said how sorry he was that he had caused them so much inconvenience, and that he hoped they would forgive him, because he really couldn't help it, for the automobile wouldn't stop. "Don't mention it," said the good, kind elephant, and then Uncle Lucky sat down and played pinoche with them, while Billy Bunny and Uncle Bullfrog sat in a blue barrel and watched them. And after a while they all stood up and said, "You win, Uncle Lucky." Yes, sirree, and a whole lot more. Uncle Lucky had won the circus and all the animals and wagons because he was as lucky as his name. "Oh, I'm the king of the circus ring. I own the tent and everything. I print the tickets and take in the money, and cover the popcorn over with honey." And Uncle Lucky forgot for a moment he was an old gentleman rabbit, and did a hop, skip, and jump around the sawdust ring. "Well, my friends," he said, "I must take my nephew back to the old briar patch, drop Uncle Bullfrog in the old mill pond, and wind my watch. After that, I'll come back, and we'll talk business, for I know lots of little towns where the boys and girls have never seen a circus, and I'm going to take my circus to every one of those small places and give the poor little children a treat." Wasn't that just like dear, kind Uncle Lucky? He didn't care whether he made money or not. All he wanted was to make people happy. And just as soon as Uncle Lucky's circus reaches the next town, I'm going to let you know, for of course Billy Bunny will be there to blow on the hornucopia. End of chapter 19. Chapter 20 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story number 20. Billy Bunny and the Rabbit's Baseball Game. One day, as Billy Bunny was hopping along, he came to a field where a lot of bunnies were playing baseball. They used a little green apple for a ball and a long carrot for a bat, and every time the batter hit the apple, he'd bite a piece off the carrot. Wasn't that funny? I never saw a baseball player do that, did you? Well, just as Billy Bunny came to the field, the rabbit who was at the bat hit a long fly way out beyond the fielders. And what do you think Billy Bunny did? Why, he hopped right under that green apple ball just as it was coming down and caught it as nicely as you please. And then he threw it to the catcher, who tagged a little rabbit just as he was going to touch the home plate for a run. And didn't everybody clap paws and thump on the ground? Well, I guess they did. Professor Crow and the Jaybird, who were sitting on the old snake fence, crowed and jayed, if that's the way to explain the sounds they made, and old Uncle Bullfrog went dunk, dunk, dunkety-dunk. I'm sure all the little people of the friendly forest and pleasant meadow must have been watching that exciting game of ball. There was Squirrel Nutcracker with his family, and Timmy Chipmunk, too. Bobby Beaver and Dickie Meadow Mouse sat together and screamed, "Rah, rah, rah," every time a bunny hit the ball. I mean, the green apple. Even old Mother Magpie perched herself on a tree nearby and watched the game, although she didn't know a thing about it. So you see, it must have been a very fun game. Hip hooray, watch the play, steady there, my bunny. Hit the ball, run, don't crawl, make a run, my honey. Well, after a while, just as the game was at its most exciting point and Billy Bunny was hopping around the bases for a home run, who should come up but the miller's boy? Goodness me, wasn't everybody frightened? The umpire was so scared he said 3 strikes and out before the batter even struck at the ball, and then the catcher threw the little green apple over to the grandstand. I mean, the old snake fence, for there wasn't any grandstand, you see, and hit Uncle Bullfrog on his fat yellow waistcoat and broke his gold watch. This made the miller's boy laugh so hard that the tears ran down his face and he couldn't see a thing. And when he did dry his eyes with his pocket handkerchief, all the little people had scurried away and hidden themselves. No, sir, there wasn't a thing to be seen except the little green apple and the carrot bat. So the miller's boy went back to the old mill and told his father all about the game, just as I've told it to you, which made him laugh so long that he didn't have time to grind the corn so I could have mush for my breakfast. End of chapter 20.
Chapter 21 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Katherine Seehelster. Story 21. Billy Bunny and the Balloon Man. Well, after the game of baseball I told you about in the last story, Billy Bunny hopped along looking for some new adventure, and by, maybe an hour or so, he saw a man with a lot of toy balloons, and some were pink, and some were blue, and others were yellow and purple. "Buy a balloon," said the man. Well, he needn't have said that, for just as soon as the little rabbit saw him, he made up his mind to buy one. So he opened his knapsack and took out a carrot cent. But, oh dear me, and oh dear you, the man wouldn't sell him a balloon for a carrot cent. Wasn't that mean in him? Then the little rabbit offered him some lettuce leaves, but the man said very crossly, "I'm not a bunny man." After that, the little bunny didn't know what to do, but he didn't give up hope. No, sirree, he didn't. He looked in his knapsack again, this time very carefully, and then, wasn't he lucky? He found a lovely apple pie. And when the balloon man saw the apple pie, he didn't wait a minute, but handed the little bunny a yellow balloon, just like that. And while the little rabbit played with it, the man ate the apple pie, and when it was all gone, he asked Billy Bunny to look once more in the knapsack. "And if you can't find an apple pie, a lemon pie will do," said the balloon man. But it wasn't any use, for there was no more pie, not even a crumb. So the little rabbit said goodbye and hopped away. "How do you like my yellow balloon? It's almost as bright as the big round moon, and when it gets dark tonight, I'll try to make it sail way up into the sky, and people will think it's the moon, maybe, if they don't see the string is held by me." And just as Billy Bunny finished singing this little song, Willy Wind blew so hard and so fast that the balloon went right up into a tree. And so did the little rabbit, for, of course, he wouldn't let go of the string. Well, maybe it was lucky that the tree was there, for who knows how far that balloon might have gone if it hadn't caught on a branch. Why, it might have gone up beyond the clouds and bumped into the twinkle, twinkle star and then burst. And then what would have happened to Little Rabbit? I'll just let you guess, for I'm sure I don't know. Well, the first thing Billy Bunny did was to tie the string to the tree, and then he looked around to see how he was ever going to climb down. And while he's looking around, I'm going to write Monday night's story, for there's no more room in this one, and tell you how he found a way to get down, for a little rabbit should not be perched up in an apple tree. End of chapter 21. Chapter 22 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Katherine Seeholster. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story 22. Billy Bunny and the Little Yellow Dog. Let me see. In the last story, I left Billy Bunny up in a tree with his beautiful yellow toy balloon. Well, it was too bad I had to leave him there all night, but I just couldn't help it. I called up the fire department and asked them to send a hook and ladder wagon around and rescue the little rabbit, but they said they couldn't unless the tree caught on fire. Then I called up the man who cleans windows and asked him to bring his long ladder, but the window cleaner man asked if there was any windows in the tree, and when I said no, he said he couldn't possibly do it. Wasn't that unkind of him? Well, after a long time, the little rabbit thought of a way. He took the string off the balloon and tied one end to a limb and slid down to the ground. Wasn't that clever of him? But, of course, that balloon got away. But he couldn't help that now, you know. "I'm going to be careful what I do now," said the little rabbit to himself as he shouldered his knapsack and picked up a striped candy cane. Then off he started. But isn't it strange, no matter how careful we are sometimes, we get into trouble, and that's just what happened to Billy Bunny. Yes, sir. He'd no sooner said, "I'm going to be careful," when he fell into a big, deep hole, and there was some muddy water in it, too, and of course the little rabbit got all muddy and wet. But oh dear me, that wasn't the worst of it. The hole was so deep he couldn't jump out, and there he was down at the bottom with his feet in the water and his little pink nose all covered with mud. Well, I don't know what would have happened if the little yellow dog hadn't come along. He sniffed around until he looked over the edge of the hole, and then, of course, he saw the little rabbit.
"What are you doing down there?"
he asked, wagging his funny yellow tail in a friendly way. Oh dear," cried Billy Bunny. "I can't get out."
"I'll get you out,"
said the little yellow dog with a friendly wag of his stubby yellow tail, and he ran off and got a long grapevine and let one end down into the little rabbit.
"Tie it around you,"
said the yellow dog, and he backed away and pulled and backed and pulled until he pulled the little bunny out of the deep hole onto the grass. And then he untied the grapevine and wagged his tail some more. And then he barked, just to make the little rabbit feel better, for he was all out of breath, and the grapevine had pinched him dreadfully, you know. "Oh, thank you," said Billy Bunny at last when he got his breath back. But what the little yellow dog said, I will tell you the next time, for just then somebody whistled, and he picked up his ears and ran off. End of story 22. Chapter 23 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Katherine Seeholster. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story 23. Billy Bunny and the Little Cricket.
"Come along with me,"
said the little yellow dog on hearing the whistle, and he started to run off. You remember in the last story how he just pulled little Billy Bunny out of the hole? Well, the little rabbit didn't follow him, for he didn't know who was at the end of that whistle, and he didn't want to get into any more trouble. So he hopped away and hid in a haystack, and by he heard a little voice singing, and so he peeped out, and there stood a little cricket. "Helloa," said the little rabbit, with a twinkle of his pink nose and a wiggle of his pink-lined ears. "Helloa, Mr. Cricket." "What are you hiding for?" "Because I want to keep out of trouble," replied the little rabbit, and then he told the cricket how he had fallen into the deep muddy hole, and how the little yellow dog had pulled him out. "And I don't want to get into any more trouble," sighed the little bunny, "for it seems to me there is nothing but trouble in this world." "Oh, don't feel blue. It doesn't do. This world is full of smiles. With happy song just hop along and laugh for miles and miles. That's what I do," said the merry little cricket, "and I'm a good little hopper, too." This made the little rabbit laugh, and then he hopped out from the haystack and over the meadow after the cricket, and by they came to the cricket's house. "I'm going to ask you in and have some nice supper," said the little cricket, and she opened the door and led Billy into her best sitting room, where there were lovely shells in a little glass cupboard, and peacock's feathers in a vase on the mantelpiece, and pretty tidies over the backs of the chairs. Then she hung his knapsack up in the closet, and put his striped candy cane in the umbrella stand, and hung his hat on a hat rack, and pulled up the shades and gave him an album filled with pictures of her uncles and aunts and other relations. "Now make yourself at home," she said, "and Uncle get the supper. Do you like tea biscuit?" Of course Billy Bunny did. I'll answer for him, just like that. So she bustled out into the kitchen and put the water on to boil, so as to have the carrot tea ready when the biscuits were cooked. And let me see, she made some lettuce salad and some coconut cake and a lemon pie, and by supper was ready. And wasn't it lucky? For Billy Bunny had looked all through the album by that time. "Now don't be bashful, but eat all you can," she said to the little rabbit. And that's the way I like to have people say to me, don't you? Especially if there's coconut cake and lemon pie. Well, this is all for tonight, for I think it's a good place to stop, don't you? End of chapter 23.
Chapter 24 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by ShrimpPhish. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story number 24, Billy Bunny and the Brown Horse. The day after Billy Bunny said good-bye to the little cricket who had given him a lovely lemon pie to put in his knapsack, he came across the old brown horse whom he had sold to the gypsies for $3. And how the old brown horse laughed when he saw the little rabbit. And then he told Billy Bunny that the gypsies had sold him for $30 to a man who had a nice rubber-tired wagon and wanted somebody to pull it about for him. "And as soon as he saw me," said the old brown horse, "he paid his money and took me home with him, and, well, here I am." "Where's the rubber-tired wagon?" asked Billy Bunny, looking under a bush and behind a stone. I guess he wanted a ride, so that was the reason he asked about the wagon, you see. "In the barn," said the old brown horse. "Do you want to go for a drive?" Well, of course he did. I never knew a little boy bunny or a little girl bunny who didn't. And with a nice kind old brown horse, too. Well, I should say so, and yes ma'am. "Come with me," said the brown horse, and pretty soon they came to the barn, and he put on his harness just the way you put on your collar and jacket, and got between the shafts. But he couldn't fasten the traces, because he couldn't turn around after getting in between the shafts, you see. So Billy Bunny leaned over the dashboard and fixed them. And then he picked up the reins and said, "Gid ap!" And the old brown horse threw up his tail and one of his heels, and away he went down the road just as nicely as you please. "Do you mind if I take my mother for a drive?" asked the little rabbit. And of course the old brown horse didn't. So Billy Bunny drove up to the old briar patch, and pretty soon Mrs. Bunny had her best bonnet tied under her chin. I mean the bonnet strings. And her black silk mitts on her front paws, and her gold locket around her neck, with Billy Bunny's father's picture inside, and off they started. And wasn't Mrs. Bunny proud of the way her little boy knew how to drive? Well, I guess she was, and the old brown horse looked as if he were worth more than $30 the way he held up his head and tail and threw out his hind feet. Now, if you're waiting to hear of an awful accident, I'll tell you right now that there isn't going to be any. I won't have anything happen to Mrs. Bunny's best bonnet and her gold locket with Mr. Bunny's picture inside. Except just then the man who had paid $30 for the old brown horse came along. Oh, dear me! How he did yell, "Stop, thief!" And of course the old horse stopped. He didn't want Bunny to be called a thief, you know, because he wasn't. And when the man was told that the brown horse was just taking them out for a drive, he didn't care a bit, but told him to be sure to get back to the stable in time for his supper of oats and hay. And if he doesn't, I'll let you know in the next story. End of chapter 24. Chapter 25 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by ShrimpPhish. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story number 25. Billy Bunny and Cousin Cottontail. In the gentle month of May, timid flowers come to stay. Then you hear the bluebell ring, songs of gladness for the spring. And the bunnies love to play in the merry month of May. I told you in the last story that if the old brown horse didn't get back in time for his supper of oats, I'd let you know. Well, he did, and so of course Mrs. Bunny and Billy Bunny reached the old briar patch in time for their supper too. And it was a mighty nice supper that was waiting for them, I must tell you, for Cousin Cottontail had come over that afternoon so that Mrs. Bunny could go out for a drive, and while she was away Cousin Cottontail had made some custard carrot pie and some lettuce lemon meringue, which are lovely things to eat, especially after being out driving and you have an enormous appetite. Well, everything was going along very nicely when all of a sudden Daddy Fox poked his nose inside the door and said, "Is there any pie left?" Wasn't that an awful thing to hear when every bit of the pie was all gone? "Then I'll have to eat a rabbit," said Daddy Fox, for nobody had said a single word, and of course he knew by that there wasn't any pie left. And then he made a jump for Billy Bunny, because he was young and tender, I suppose, but just as Daddy Fox crouched down for his spring, somebody grabbed him by the tail, and he was yanked back just like a ball with a rubber string to it. "Don't you dare hurt Billy Bunny," said a deep, growly voice, and there stood the good, kind old bear who had once given Uncle Lucky his stovepipe hat when it blew off the kind old gentleman rabbit's head. And the bear didn't let go of Daddy Fox's tail either, but gave it a twist, which made the wicked fox squint up his eyes. "Now get out of here and don't you ever come back," said the great big bear. And he kicked Daddy Fox clear across the pleasant meadow, just like a football. Well, sir, after that, Mrs. Bunny got out a jar of honey and spread it all over some raisin bread, and the bear had all he could eat. And then he thanked Mrs. Bunny for her kindness and went back to his cave, telling the little bunny to call him up on the phone, SOS Mountainside, if the fox came back, and he would come right down and lock him up in the jail, next to the engine house in Rabbitville. But I hope in the next story I won't have to tell you anything so dreadful as that. End of chapter 25.
Chapter 26 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story 26. Billy Bunny and the Tailor Bird. Well, Daddy Fox didn't come back. As I told you in the last story, I was afraid he might. So little Billy Bunny went to bed and dreamed all night that he was eating carrot custard pie. But when he woke up, he was just as hungry as he always was for breakfast. After that, he hopped out to the pleasant meadow to see what was going on. The first person he saw was Mrs. Cow with her little calf, and then the miller's boy with his dog came along by the old snake fence. So Billy Bunny hopped around the other side of the old briar patch and then across the road into the friendly forest, and by he came to the little pond with the big chestnut tree right in the middle of it, the friendly forest pool, you know. There stood Mr. Water Rat in his doorway chewing a reed stem, and when he saw Billy Bunny, he asked the little rabbit to come in. But his doorway was too small, so Billy Bunny hopped along. First he picked a bunch of pretty yellow iris flowers, for he thought he might find somebody who loved flowers, and then he'd give them away. "I know what I'll do," said the little rabbit suddenly. "I'll take them over to Uncle Lucky. He loves flowers." So off hopped the little rabbit, holding the bright yellow flowers in one paw and his striped candy cane in the other, and carrying the knapsack over his shoulder like a bunny Boy Scout. Well, after he had gone for maybe a mile or maybe less, he heard a snipping, snapping sound. "What is that, I wonder?" said the little rabbit out loud. And then he looked up into a tree and saw the tailor bird with his long shears cutting his little boy's hair. Snip, snap, and off came the little bird's curls, while the mother tailor bird cried very softly, for she didn't want her little bird boy to look grown up, which is the way all mothers feel, I believe, when their little boys lose their curls. And what do you suppose Billy Bunny did? Why, he handed his lovely bunch of yellow flowers to the mother tailor bird, and this pleased her so that she stopped crying and picked up her little boy's curls and put them in a box and hid them away in her bureau drawer right next to his first little shoe. After she had done this, she gave the little rabbit a lollipop. Then off he went again, clippity-clop, lippity-lop, until it was noontime, when he sat down for his lunch. And while he was eating his apple pie, a big buzzy bee flew up and ate all the sugar which was sprinkled over the crust. Now, wasn't that mean of her? For I think apple pie without sugar all over the crust isn't half so nice, do you? And so did Billy Bunny, and if he doesn't tell the bee to go to the grocery store the next time for her sugar, I'll tell you in tomorrow's story how she went to the moving pictures. That is, if she doesn't sting the ticket man before she buys her ticket. End of chapter 26. Read by Gila Labinger Freeberg, Napa, June 22nd, 2024. Chapter 27 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story 27. Billy Bunny and the Hungry Dog. Well, after the bee flew off to the grocery store to buy some sugar, as I mentioned in the last story I thought Billy Bunny would tell her to do, because he didn't want her to eat the sugar off his other apple pie, the little rabbit took a little nap. He used his knapsack for a pillow, just like a soldier boy, and soon he was in the land of dreams, where the candy carrots grow so sweet beside the lollipops. You've never really time to eat the lettuce lemon drops unless you leave the carrot sticks and pass the lollipops, and that is awful hard to do unless you take big hops. And while he was dreaming, a hungry dog came by, and as soon as he saw the little rabbit, he made up his mind to eat him. And if he didn't wake up in time, he'd eat him while he was asleep. Oh dear, wasn't that terrible? For if he'd waited a minute, perhaps the little bunny would wake up and maybe find some way to escape. Well, I guess this would have been the last of my stories about Billy Bunny if just then a blackbird hadn't whistled. And when that dog heard the whistle, he turned around and ran away as fast as he could. I guess he thought it was his master calling him. And wasn't it lucky for the little rabbit, and wasn't it nice in that blackbird? Well, after that, Billy Bunny woke up and said, "Who's whistling?" And then the blackbird began to laugh and said, "Who's awake?" But the little rabbit didn't see the joke, and the blackbird flew away just then, for he suddenly remembered that his wife had asked him to get a lima bean at the grocery store. Then the little rabbit swung his knapsack over his back and started off again, and by he came to a hollow log which had fallen across a little brook. All the little animals ran inside, and all the big animals walked over it when they wished to cross to the other side. But the little rabbit was just a little too wide and just a little too high to crawl inside, so he hopped on top very carefully, and his left hind foot slipped only 1.5 times, and soon he was safely across and ready to go on when a big cowbird flew up and said, "Did you tell Mrs. Bluebird that I laid an egg in her nest?" "No, I didn't," said the little rabbit, "but I will, you horrid, mean old bird, to do such a thing." And off he hopped as fast as he could to find the bluebird. And wasn't that cowbird angry? Well, I should say she was, but Billy Bunny didn't care. He swung his candy cane in the air and said, "Don't you peck me!" And if she should, I'll tell you in the next story what the little rabbit did to her. End of chapter 27. Read by Gila, Labinger, Freeberg. Napa, June 22nd, 2024.
Chapter 28 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Kathleen Ellins. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story number 28, Billy Bunny and Uncle Bunny's Nephews. If a cowbird pecked a bunny, what would a bunny do? Perhaps he'd do a lot of things, if he could only flew. You remember in the last story I promised to tell you what Billy Bunny did to the cowbird if she pecked him. Well, she did, but before the little rabbit had time to wink, she flew away. And as rabbits can't fly, the only thing he could do was shake his candy cane at her and say, "Some day you'll be sorry for what you've done to me, for if I ever catch you, I'll hang you to a tree." After that he looked at his gold watch and chain, which good, kind Uncle Lucky had given him, and then he remembered how he had intended 2 or 3 stories ago to take the yellow iris flowers to his good, kind uncle, and how he'd given them instead to Mrs. Tailor Bird. "Well, that's too bad," said the little rabbit. "Now I must find something else to give my dear Uncle Lucky." So he looked around to see what he could take to him, and right there on the ground was a big diamond pin. Hip hooray, and a pink pin cushion! Just the thing for dear Uncle Lucky's big red tie. So the little rabbit picked up the diamond pin and hurried off for Uncle Lucky's house, and by he came to the front gate where his kind uncle was standing talking to a rabbit friend of his, Mr. O'Hare. But when he saw his little nephew, Uncle Lucky Left Hind Foot laughed right out loud. He was so glad. And then he said to Mr. O'Hare, "This is my nephew, William Bunny, from Old Briar Patch, Snake Fence Corner." And Mr. O'Hare said, "Pleased to meet you." Then the little rabbit took the diamond pin out of his knapsack and gave it to his uncle, which tickled the old gentleman rabbit almost to pieces, for he was very fond of jewelry. "Let's go for a ride." And Uncle Lucky went into his garage and got his automobile, and after his friend Mr. O'Hare and Billy Bunny were seated on the rear seat, he tooted his horn and away he went down the road in his Lucky-mobile. For he had just bought a new machine, and this is what it was called, and the number of it was 3030 USA. Well, after a while, the gentleman rabbit friend of Uncle Lucky, Mr. O'Hare, asked to be taken home, for Mrs. O'Hare was giving a dinner party, and he wanted to put on his dress suit and white waistcoat, and if he stayed out any longer, he was afraid he wouldn't have time to tie his white cravat. So good, kind Uncle Lucky turned around and took him home as fast as he could. But just as he was nearly there, a sheriff, who was a sort of country policeman, stopped the Lucky Mobile by firing a bullet into each of the 4 tires, because Uncle Lucky wouldn't stop. And if the country copper doesn't tell an awful whopper, the country judge will let them go in time to see the movie show. End of chapter 28.
Chapter 29 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Kathleen Ellins. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story number 29. Billy Bunny and the Nightingale. "All's well that ends well," said good, kind Uncle Lucky, after he had paid a big fine for exceeding the speed limit, which means going too fast, and he and Billy Bunny were once more in the Lucky Mobile, for they had taken Mr. O'Hare, the rabbit friend of Uncle Lucky, home to his wife and dinner party. But they were still a long ways from home, and it was growing dark, and oh dear me and oh dear you, when Billy Bunny tried to light the lamps, there wasn't any electric oil in them, for Uncle Lucky had forgotten to fill them with electricity. "What shall I do?" cried the old gentleman rabbit distractedly, which means terribly excited. I don't know why my typewriter uses such big words, unless it reads the dictionary when I'm not looking. Well, anyway, after the old gentleman rabbit had scratched his knee to think what he could do, Billy Bunny said all of a sudden, "Why, Uncle Lucky, your diamond pin shines just like a searchlight. Stick that on the front of the automobile." But more and more trouble. The pin wouldn't stick into the hard iron. So what did Uncle Lucky have to do but take off his lovely red cravat and tie it around the front of the automobile and then stick the diamond pin into it. Of course, the old gentleman rabbit asked his nephew to spend the night with him, and of course Billy Bunny said he would. And after supper, they played a game of pinochle and then went to bed. But what do you think happened in the middle of the night? Why, Uncle Lucky suddenly woke up and remembered that he hadn't taken his lovely red cravat off the automobile with the big diamond in it. "Help, help!" cried Uncle Lucky, so excited that he did not stop to think what he was saying. And then he hopped downstairs as fast as he could in his blue pajamas and silk nightcap and out to the garage. But when he got there, the diamond pin was gone, and so was the red cravat. But the automobile was still there. That was something. Oh dear, why am I so forgetful?" cried poor Uncle Lucky. And just then, Billy Bunny came out of the door and said, "What is the matter, Uncle Lucky?" "That is too bad," said the little rabbit when he heard what had happened. "Who do you suppose stole the pin?" "I don't know, I'm sure," said his uncle. Just then they heard a nightingale singing, "Twinkle, twinkle, diamond pin, shine out very bright. If you do, I'm sure that you will be found tonight." And in the next story, you shall hear how Uncle Lucky found his red cravat and his diamond pin. End of chapter 29.
Chapter 30 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Adam Roxby. Find out more at adamroxby.co.uk. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story number 30. Billy Bunny and the Bat. "Did you hear that?" said Uncle Lucky in a whisper, as the nightingale stopped singing. You remember in the last story that Uncle Lucky and Billy Bunny were hunting for the diamond pin, which the old gentleman rabbit had forgotten to take out of the automobile. It was in the middle of the night too, you know, so it wasn't an easy thing to do. Then the Nightingale began to sing again. Twinkle, twinkle, diamond pin, like a pretty star, then I'm sure that Billy Bunny will see where you are. And it turned out just as she sang, for a few minutes later the little rabbit saw a tiny sparkling light in the grass, and there was the red cravat with the diamond pin in it. But of course neither he nor Uncle Lucky ever knew how it got there. But they were so happy at finding it, they really didn't care. But just the same, I'm going to tell you. For the Nightingale told me, and I was awfully curious before she did. A bat who lived in a church steeple nearby had seen the diamond pin and wanted to wear it. So he flew into the garage and untied the red cravat, but just as he was carrying it away with him, the Nightingale who was sitting up in the tree cried out, "Drop that tie, you horrid bat, or I'll take away your hat. Stealing is a dreadful sin, don't you take that diamond pin." And of course the bat was so frightened that he dropped the cravat in the grass and flew away as fast as he could. Well, after all this excitement, Billy Bunny couldn't go to sleep again, so he and Uncle Lucky got dressed and played the gramophone all the rest of the night, and when morning came they were so sleepy that they fell asleep and never woke until afternoon, when they had their breakfast. And after that they felt much better. "I think some fresh air will do us both good," said kind Uncle Lucky, and he got out his automobile. And after they had gone a mile or so, they came across a little old hen picking up rags and scraps of iron, which she put into her little two-wheeled cart. And the bells on it made such a noise that people came out of their houses and gave her rags and bottles and kitchen stoves and iron beds. And let me see, what else? Well, everything they didn't want. And all the time she kept singing this song. Any old rags, any old tags, any old clothes for sale, any old thing from a shoe to a ring, an elephant trunk, or a little tin pail. End of chapter 30. Recorded in Colchester, in the UK.
Chapter 31 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story number 31. Billy Bunny and the Circus Band. I wonder where I left off. Oh, yes, I remember now. Billy Bunny and Uncle Lucky had just met the little old hen who was picking up rags. Well, she tried to get Uncle Lucky to give her his old stovepipe hat, but he wouldn't. I wore it on my wedding day, and I shall wear it till I die, said the old gentleman rabbit. Then he gave her 5 carat cents and cranked up the Lucky Mobile and drove off. By and by, after a mile or 3, he said to Billy Bunny, I think somebody told me there's to be a circus parade today in Rabbitville. Let's motor over and see. And after a while, not so very long, they heard music, and then the parade came into view. And oh me, or my, wasn't it just too splendid for anything? Well, I guess yes, 3 times. Perhaps my circus is in town, exclaimed the kind old gentleman rabbit. He had forgotten all about it. You see, ever since he became the owner of this nice big circus, he had told the manager to visit all the little towns, so that all the boys and girls who had never seen an elephant or a clown could see one, even if the circus didn't make any money. For Uncle Lucky was just as rich as he was kind, and perhaps that's the reason he was so rich, for he never worked, that I know of. At the head of the parade was the circus elephant, and then came the Rabbitville Fife and Drum Corps, and the Bunnyville 7th Regiment, and the Cottontail Fire Department, and the Bunny Boy Scouts, and let me see, oh yes, the Squirrel Sharpshooters. It was certainly a wonderful parade, and Uncle Lucky's circus band played for all they were worth, and the way the circus elephant walked on his hind legs and swung his baton was splendid. He knew how to throw it up into the air and spin it around even better than a regular bandmaster. And then everybody sang, "Hurrah for my country, the land of the free! Hurrah for the soldier and the sailor on the sea! Hurrah for the eagle and the red, white, and blue! And hurrah for the bunny boys who've joined the colors true!" Then every man bunny enlisted in the army except Uncle Lucky, for he was too old, and little Billy Bunny, for he was too young. And anyway, he belonged to the Bunny Boy Scouts of Snake Fence Corner. After that, Uncle Lucky, who was an old soldier, stood up in the Lucky Mobile and made a speech. And he waved his old stovepipe hat in the air, and then pulled off one of the little United States flags from the front of the automobile and waved it till everybody got so excited that the chief of police had to turn the fire hose on them to quiet them. Well, this is all for tonight, but tomorrow you shall hear the story about Uncle Lucky's stovepipe hat in case it doesn't scratch the cat. End of chapter 31. Chapter 32 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story number 32. Billy Bunny and the Circus Cowboy. Well, Uncle Lucky's stovepipe hat didn't scratch the cat after all, as I told you I feared it might in last night's story, but it did something else. It blew off the old gentleman rabbit's head and went rolling down the street. Uncle Lucky started after it in his Lucky Mobile as fast as he could, but oh dear me, and oh dear you, how that stovepipe hat did go! And by it disappeared in the woods, and Uncle Lucky had to make the Lucky Mobile jump over a fence and across a brook, and then he couldn't find it. Well, I guess my dear old wedding stovepipe hat is gone forever, said the old gentleman rabbit sorrowfully, and he wiped a tear from his left eye, and two more from his right, and sighed again. Oh, dear me, my dear old wedding hat. And just then Billy Bunny saw a shadow creeping through the trees. Look, Uncle Lucky, he cried. Isn't that Daddy Fox with your stovepipe hat on his head? It is, cried Uncle Lucky, and he got so angry that he made the Lucky Mobile jump 3.5 times its own length after Daddy Fox. Come back with my hat, screamed the old gentleman rabbit, and he made the automobile go so fast that Billy Bunny was nearly scared to death. But still they couldn't catch Daddy Fox. What are we going to do? Asked the old gentleman rabbit anxiously. I mustn't lose my stovepipe hat. And just then the cowboy in Uncle Lucky's circus rode by, and when he saw what was the matter, he threw his lasso over Daddy Fox's head, and whip, snap! That wicked old fox was caught as nicely as you please. And Uncle Lucky's stovepipe hat wasn't hurt the least bit. No, sir, it never even came off the fox's head. Then the cowboy, who was very fond of Uncle Lucky, got the hat and gave it to the old gentleman rabbit. I'm so glad to do you a favor, Mr. Lucky Left Hindfoot, he said, for you have been so nice to us circus folks. And then he rode off, after tying the lasso to the pommel of his saddle. And, of course, Daddy Fox went with him. And, oh my, didn't he scowl at Uncle Lucky and Billy Bunny? I'll get you two some day, I will, and then I'll make you squeal. You think you're safe because you have a lucky automobile. But if I ever get away from this unkind lasso, I'll bet you anything I will eat lots of rabbit stew. And in the next story, if the doormat doesn't climb into the hammock and go to sleep, I'll tell you how Daddy Fox got away from the circus cowboy. End of chapter 32.
Chapter 33 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Katherine Seeholster. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story 33. Billy Bunny and the Toll Man. As the circus cowboy dragged off Daddy Fox, as I told you in the last story, Billy Bunny and Uncle Lucky began to laugh, and Uncle Lucky laughed so hard that his stovepipe hat almost fell off his head. But he pushed it on just in time, for he didn't want to lose it again. Then he started off the Lucky Mobile once more, and by, he and his rabbit nephew came to a bridge, and the man who kept the bridge said they must pay toll before they could cross. "What is the toll?" asked Uncle Lucky. But, oh, dear me, when he went to take out his purse, he found he had left it at home. "I'm sorry," said the bridgeman, "but you can't go across unless you pay me first." Then Billy Bunny opened his knapsack and took out a big apple pie. And when the tall man saw that, he said, "Give me that pie, and you can cross over and back again." For it was a lovely pie, and the tall man knew a good pie when he saw one. "It's a shame to give away that pie," said Uncle Lucky, for he knew the toll wasn't as much as a whole big apple pie. So he said to the tall man, "You can have half, but no more. We don't want to come back this way." But the tall man was hungry, especially after seeing the pie, so he said, "You must give me all that pie or turn back." And when he said that, you should have seen good, kind Uncle Lucky. I mean, you should have seen angry, ugly Uncle Lucky. "Get out of our way!" shouted the old gentleman rabbit. And would you believe it? He sent the Lucky Mobile flying across the bridge before the tall man could stop him. Yes, sir. The Lucky Mobile jumped right over the little toll gate and was just over the bridge before you could say Jack Rabbit. "There now!" cried Uncle Lucky. "This serves the old cheat of a toll man just right. If he had behaved himself, I would have given him half the pie, but now he shan't have any, which I hope will teach him a good lesson and keep him from cheating some little boy or girl who wants to cross his bridge in a pushmobile or on a roller skates." Well, after that nothing happened for over 1 mile and 200 feet, when all of a sudden, just like that, quicker than lightning, a big black bull jumped right in front of the Lucky Mobile. His eyes were red as bricks, and his nostrils were shooting out steam like a radiator when it's out of order. And if Uncle Lucky hadn't stopped the automobile in time, he would have broken that bull's horn and the lamps on the Lucky Mobile. "Don't you come any farther," bellowed the angry bull. "Don't you come any farther either," cried Uncle Lucky, although he was shaking so with fear that his stovepipe hat fell off his head. Now please don't be impatient with me, because I don't finish this story tonight, but I really haven't any more room. End of chapter 33. Chapter 34 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Katherine C. Holster. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story 34. Billy Bunny and the Angry Bull. As I left off in the last story, the angry bull stood right in the middle of the road, so that Uncle Lucky couldn't drive the automobile any further. "Be careful, Uncle Lucky," whispered Billy Bunny. "He might puncture one of the front tires, for his horns are very pointed." "If I back the automobile, I'm afraid the bull will run at us," said Uncle Lucky in a low voice. "What shall I do?" All this time, the angry bull was puffing steam out of his nostrils and rolling his great red eyes around and around, till 2 rabbits grew so frightened that they almost fell off the seat. And then the little rabbit thought of something. He opened his knapsack and took out a Roman candle which he had saved from the last 4th of July and lighted it. And then he pointed it right at the angry bull. Well, you know what comes out of a Roman candle. No sooner did the first colored star hit the bull in the face than he stopped snorting. And when a yellow star hit him on the nose, he stopped lashing his tail. And when about 3 dozen stars all at once hit him on the head, he turned and ran down the road so fast that he left his shadow behind him for over 1.5 miles. And wasn't little Billy Bunny proud to think he had saved dear, kind Uncle Lucky and himself and the automobile from that dreaded bull? Well, it made the old gentleman rabbit so happy that he began to sing. "There's always a way to get out of a scrape, unless, of course, you've done wrong. There's no better way to get out of the blues than to sing a bright sunny song.
So never despair, but laugh that old care, and whistle away all day long. That is what dear, kind Uncle Lucky was always doing, laughing and doing good, smiling and helping somebody who needed help, giving away money and asking nothing in return. And we should remember this bright song of his, for Uncle Lucky knew how to be happy, and we can learn how too, from this kind old gentleman rabbit. And now, my little nephew, said Uncle Lucky, tell me what time it is by that gold chain I gave you. So the little rabbit took out his gold watch, and would you believe it? It was 14 hours past 13 o'clock. Gracious me! We must be getting home. And Uncle Lucky turned the automobile around as fast as he could and started off. And by the time Billy Bunny had rolled up his knapsack, they were in front of Uncle Lucky's house. And if the tea kettle doesn't make the coffee in the lemonade pitcher by mistake for my breakfast, I'll tell you another story tomorrow night about these two rabbit friends of ours. End of chapter 34.
Chapter 35 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Stacey M. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story 35. Billy Bunny and the Moving Picture Show. There's no place like home, sighed Uncle Lucky, as he tied the Lucky Mobile up in the stable and gave it a drink of gasoline, and then he and Billy Bunny went into the house for supper. The little rabbit always loved to eat supper at Uncle Lucky's, and so would you, after I tell you what there was to eat. First, there were lettuce sandwiches, and turnip topovers and carrot cambric tea, then sugar-coated carrot candies, and after that, apple pie with lots of brown sugar over the crust. Well, what shall we do now? Said Uncle Lucky after supper was over. Let's go to a moving picture show, said Billy Bunny, and no sooner had he said the word than dear kind Uncle Lucky put on his stovepipe hat and started off. And by they came to the building where the moving picture show was held, and Uncle Lucky bought 2 tickets, and in they went. But oh, dear me, and oh, dear you. Isn't it strange that something always has to happen to these 2 nice bunnies? Won't somebody please ask the policeman to see that nothing awful happens after this? Well, no sooner had the old gentleman rabbit and his small nephew sat down than the place caught on fire, and everybody tried to get out of the door at the same time. And if the side of the building hadn't given way, I guess 2 or 5 people would have been squeezed out of their shoes and stockings. And when everybody was out and the place all burned down, the fire engine came puffing up and squirted water all over the people who were trying to get their money back from the ticket man. Let them keep our money, said Uncle Lucky. I'd rather lose it than get all wet. And he jumped into his automobile and started off for home. But goodness me, he didn't notice that Billy Bunny wasn't with him. Wasn't it careless of kind Uncle Lucky? You see, he was so excited over the fire that he forgot for a moment his small nephew wasn't with him, and so off he went. And when Billy Bunny looked around, of course he couldn't find the old gentleman rabbit, nor the Lucky Mobile. Well, this is too bad, said Billy Bunny. What shall I do? And then, without answering himself, he hopped off down the road toward Uncle Lucky's house. But he had only gone a little ways, just so far, when a big owl flew out of a barn and picked up the little rabbit and carried him back to her nest. This is the last of me, thought the little rabbit. And then he thought again, and this time he thought something else, for he turned up his strong little hind legs and kicked that bad owl on her funny bone until she laughed so loud that she dropped the little rabbit on a pile of straw, just as she was going to fly into the barn with him. Wasn't that lucky? And in tomorrow's story, you shall hear how disappointed the owl was. End of chapter 35.
Chapter 36 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Dave Capper. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story 36. Billy Bunny and the Little Sparrow. Of course, if the owl hadn't dropped Billy Bunny on the pile of straws I told you in last night's story, there might not have been any story tonight, for owls are fond of eating nice tender little rabbits. But it's wonderful how lucky this little rabbit is in getting out of scrapes. Well, no sooner did he touch the straw than he hid underneath, and the bad owl couldn't find him anywhere, although she looked under the pump, and over the wheelbarrow, and behind the pitchfork, in every place she could think of. Then, after that, she tooted a very sad song, and this is the way it went. "Oh dear, I've lost my supper, I'm very sad to tell. I had a tender rabbit, but on the straw he fell. And now I cannot find him, whatever shall I do? I'll have to catch a mouse, I guess, or a little kangaroo." And then she tooted 3 times just like an automobile horn, and flew away to look for her supper. "Now's my chance," whispered the little rabbit, and away he hopped down the road straight for Uncle Lucky's house. But when he got there, the front door was locked, and all the windows dark, and the hammock rolled up in a corner of the piazza, and the croquet box locked so they couldn't crawl inside. "What shall I do?" said the little bunny, after he had knocked for the 49th and a half time on the front door. "Oh dear, what shall I do?" And then a little sparrow looked out of her nest under the porch and said, "I will tap on the window where Uncle Lucky dozes, and if that doesn't wake him up, I'll hit him with some roses." Then off she flew to tap on the old gentleman rabbit's window. But oh dear me, he was so sound asleep that it didn't wake him up the least little bit. So she flew down to the garden and picked a big bunch of roses. First, she threw a white rose through the window, but it fell so gently on his pillow that dear Uncle Lucky never heard it. Then she tossed in a yellow rose, but it fell on the floor without waking him. After that, she threw in a little pink rose, but it just touched his ear and only made him snore. At last, she threw in a whole bunch of big red roses, and they fell all around his nose, and their perfume was so sweet that it woke him up, and he ran downstairs and let Billy Bunny in. And then the little sparrow went back to her nest and cuddled her little birds to sleep. End of Chapter 36. Chapter 37 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Dave Capper. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story 37. Billy Bunny and the Tattered Tramp. Well, as I told you in the last story, Uncle Lucky let his little rabbit nephew in the front door. And wasn't he glad to see him? And so would you if you had locked out your rabbit aunt or cousin by mistake. "Do you feel hungry?" asked Uncle Lucky as he closed the door. "Because if you do, I'll get you some carrot cheese." Then they both went into the pantry and had a feast. And when they had finished, it was morning. So they drank some coffee and made believe it was breakfast. And after that, they went out to the garden to look at the cabbage and carrots. And Uncle Lucky happened to remember there was to be a picnic that day in the woods, so he picked a lot of cabbages and carrots and went into the kitchen, and in a few minutes he had packed a large hamper, which is a large basket, you know, just full of all sorts of good things to eat, pies and cakes and sandwiches and sarsaparilla and lemon soda and hard-boiled eggs, and then he dragged it out and put it into the automobile. And after that, he sat down and wiped his forehead with his big blue polka-dot handkerchief, for he was pretty warm. "Put some gasoline in the tank, Billy Bunny," said the old gentleman rabbit, taking off his stovepipe hat and wiping the rim inside with the same polka-dot handkerchief, for his other one was upstairs in the left-hand corner of his upper bureau drawer, and he was too tired to hop upstairs and get it. So the little rabbit got the gasoline and blew up the tires and dusted off the Lucky Mobile and shined up the license number so that anybody could see it easily in case they ran over somebody else. And then Uncle Lucky hopped in, and so did Billy Bunny, and away they went for the picnic grounds. But oh dear me, just as I was afraid, something happened. And it happened awfully quickly, too. A torn and tattered tramp threw a big log right in front of the automobile, and over it went, not the log, you know, but the automobile. And out went both rabbits and the hamper besides, with all the pies and soda bottles. And when Uncle Lucky and Billy Bunny were picking themselves up, the tramp drank 24 hard-boiled eggs and ate all the soda water. Oh dear, please forgive me. I've got everything all twisted, but you know what I mean. And then the tramp got all twisted, for he hadn't eaten that many eggs since he began to tramp. And then he began to moan, "Why did I eat that 24th egg and drink that 13th soda? I feel like a very sick Chinaman inside a pink pagoda." "I'll go for a doctor," said dear, kind Uncle Lucky, who by this time had turned over the automobile, and away he and Billy Bunny went for the wise duck doctor who had cured the little black ant in a story I told you some time ago. End of chapter 37.
Chapter 38 of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Larry Wilson. Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory. Story 38. Billy Bunny and Miss Hippopotamus. As Billy Bunny and Uncle Lucky sped away in the Lucky-mobile after the doctor to cure the poor, sick tramp, as I told you in the other story, they came across the circus cowboy, dragging Daddy Fox along with the lasso. It was about 3 stories ago, I think, I promised to tell you what happened to Daddy Fox. Well, I haven't had time to tell you yet, but I'm going to right now while Uncle Lucky and Billy Bunny go for the doctor. "Don't let him go," called out the old gentleman rabbit as he sped by in his machine. "Don't worry, Mr. Lucky Left Hind Foot," replied the honest cowboy. "I'm going to take him to the circus and let the big hippopotamus play with him." "Oh, please don't do that," cried Daddy Fox. "You keep quiet, you old thief," said the cowboy, giving the lasso a pull which made Daddy Fox squint up his eyes. "You are always after that little rabbit and his good kind uncle, and now I'm going to make you suffer." And he gave the lasso another pull, and pretty soon they came to the circus tent, and just then the hippopotamus made a dreadful noise. "Oh, please don't let the hippopotamus play with me," Daddy Fox begged again, and he looked so mournful that the honest cowboy felt sorry for him. "If you'll promise to jump through a hoop of fire and climb a greased pole and not drink any lemonade or eat any peanuts and join our circus for all summer, maybe I'll ask the hippopotamus if she'd as soon have a rubber doll," said the cowboy kindly. "Oh, I'll promise, I'll promise," cried Daddy Fox. "I'll jump through 1,000 rings of fire and climb the North Pole and never eat a peanut nor touch a drop of lemonade. And I'll stay with the circus all summer and Christmas too, if you won't let that awful grinning, big-mouthed hippopotamus play with me." "All right," said the honest cowboy. "Now cross your heart and say, 'Eeny, meeny, sure's I'm born, I'll play each day on the big French horn, and jump through a hoop if it's all on fire, and climb a pole as high as a spire, and I'll stay with the circus until you say, it's time, Daddy Fox, you went away.'" So Daddy Fox folded his front paws over his heart and repeated this solemn pledge. And after that the honest cowboy took the lasso off his neck and led him into the circus. And that evening everybody saw Daddy Fox perform like a regular expert. He never even singed a hair, for he jumped through the rings so fast the flames couldn't touch him. And now that I've told you about him, I must stop, for I have come to the end of this book. But there is a next book which I have called Billy Bunny and Daddy Fox, and in that book I'll tell you what else happened to these two funny people. End of chapter 38. End of Billy Bunny and the Friendly Elephant by David Cory.